This is BLANDALF the White. It's one of my favorite builds and you've heard me talk about it many times. But there's something going on with it, so we're going to take a crack under the hood and see what's going on. I'm HMODS, and you're watching HMODS.
Oh, yeah! You gotta get sweaty! You gotta get sweaty in here! It's time to get sweaty!
This video is brought to you by CyberGameway, with an emphasis on exposing streamers of all types, as well as exploring business relationships with partnered websites and service providers. CyberGameway is the place you want to be for streaming gamers who want that sub bump. To apply for membership or sponsorship, head over to cybergameway.com.
So as I said, you've heard me talk about this thing many times. It's one of my favorite builds because of its elegance and its beauty. There's not a whole lot going on with it under the hood, but, and I've said this many times, if you don't need it to do very much, don't spend your money. Don't do it. It's an older Corsair carbide air case, and I like these cases. They're simple, they're elegant. It sort of has, and I don't know if there's any architects out there, but it always reminded me of brutalist architecture. There's a courthouse in Boston that I really, really like because of just sort of intimidating, simple beauty. And that's kind of what this is. You know, it's got the angled lines. It's got really, really pretty lines. Kind of like my car. It's a Mazda Speed. It's a very simple case. And the case is white. So what I've done is, since this computer really only does one thing, which is run my entertainment center. I watch Netflix, I download movies, and I watch them on VLC. Since that's all it does, I didn't need it to do a whole lot, but I didn't want it to have a beauty to it. And since the case is white, when I've got it in movie theater mode, which is all the lights off and my big, huge 75-inch TV with 120 hertz refresh rate, when I've got all that stuff going on, I didn't want it to be too distracting. So, as you can see, I've painted this panel black, and I also sort of flicked red paint on it before I clear coated it. So you can barely see that going on, but it's really, really nice to look at. Apart from that, I'm a big believer in this. I painted the inside of the bay white. I didn't do the back white because all the cables are back there and you're never going to look at it anyway. But over here, I painted it white, and it's a textured white. So it's kind of a flat, and it doesn't really reflect a whole lot. And there's two reasons for that. One, it's really nice to look at, and two, since it's not reflecting so much light, it's not as distracting as it would be. Even with the lights on in my man cave, it's really distracting. I find myself staring at it all the time, no matter what movie I'm watching or what I'm doing, because it's really, really nice to look at. It's one of my favorite builds because of its simplicity and its elegance. Under the hood, we've got up here fans. They're Chinese fans. They're not the greatest in the world, but as you can see, you can't hear them really well. And I've got a really, really good mic going on here, and you can't really hear them. It's not too loud. It's got an Asus B150M Mighty X motherboard. Not the best in the world, but it's really cool. It does what it needs to do. Got 16 gigabytes of Team Group RAM going on, 2400 megahertz, nothing big, but they're red, and I like red. And it also goes with, as you can see, the red LEDs coming out from underneath the motherboard. Really, really cool. Master air cooler, pretty, simplistic, does the job, and you can see it as opposed to an air cooler with the fans mounted to the side. I really like that. Other than that, it's got a GTX 750 Ti GPU. Nothing big again, and I didn't need it to do anything more than it. I'm not running any video games, I'm just watching movies. Here's the issue. When I'm watching movies on VLC, if I'm watching something that's a bigger file, like an 8 gigabyte movie file, every once in a while, it will stop, the whole display will go black and reboot, and I won't be able to watch movies anymore until I reboot the computer. So what this tells me is there's something wrong with the GPU, and if I had to guess, it's the thermal paste. So what we're going to do is we're going to get this thing downstairs, and we're going to repair it. And so with that in mind, let's go to the workshop. Okay, so being a tech enthusiast, you have probably seen a number of other tech tubers do what I'm about to do. Definitely Jay, and maybe Linus and Steve, and definitely Kyle. But the more exposure you have to something like this, the better, because the easier it's going to be to understand that what I'm about to do is not that difficult. It just requires a bit of forethought because you need to remember that everything has to go back to where it was. When dealing with high-end electronics like this, or at least when this was high-end electronics, you just need to understand that it's nowhere near as precarious as, you know, the companies themselves would have you believe. But it does require a bit of carefulness because you're dealing with lots of screws, and then you're also dealing with the CPB, which can get damaged. So with that in mind, it is time for disassembly, and I will need my magnetic thing. Also, I need my anti-static bracelet. $2 on Wish. So, first thing we do is we get all the screws off. Now these ones on the top, they're spring loaded, so be sure they're not really powerful springs, and the springs are somewhat connected to the actual screw itself, but you still want to make sure and keep track of that because you will need that. They're sort of tensioner screws, so you don't want to over screw them, and that's what the springs are for. And since I don't have one of Steve's handy dandy mouse pads of doom, I'm just going to have to make sure that I put everything where I need it to be. He's got this little thing where it's got like little sections where you can put everything, and it's got the measurements and all that stuff. I don't have that because things. Also, I don't have a load of money. This is one of those things where you just want to be just the teensiest bit careful because you can, when you're removing this part, you can strip it if you're using something as stupid as what I'm about to do. I am somewhat of a genius because last time I cleaned this, I didn't tighten them too badly. So kudos to me. This one you do not want to lose because this one will keep it on the bracket, which actually goes onto that, which connects the whole thing to the case. Mounts. That's the CPB. It's just like a small motherboard, and there's the processor right there. And as you can tell, it doesn't have much in the way of a VRM. But back then it really didn't need. So we're just going to take off the. Yeah, you can tell that the thermal paste has gotten a little bit dry and thin. So reapplying it will definitely help. So contact cleaner is alcohol based, and so you do need to be a little bit sparing with it. On the other hand, since it's not plugged into anything, it's not gonna just. There you go. That's it. All off there. You can tell that there's just the teensiest bit of thermal paste on the side. Just gonna get that off. Well, on processors, if you apply too much thermal paste, it looks terrible. And two, it can affect your heat. Because it's like, if you're covering something too much, you're just gonna heat it up. So thermal paste, while being good conductant between a processor and its heatsink, you can definitely use too much. If you're looking at this, like, it's just not that big a thing. I mean, this is an older card, but things haven't changed a whole lot since then. It just, they've gotten bigger. I mean, this was a TI, but the technology itself hasn't really evolved that much over time. Okay, so now we've got all the thermal paste off. There isn't anything wrong with it. So what it's doing, I'm pretty sure, can just be attested to the thermal paste being dry and crappy. So reapplying it should fix the problem easily. And if not, well, it's a really, really old card to begin with, and it's not a big loss. But I'm reasonably sure that when all of this is fixed and put back together, it will just go swimmingly. As I've said many times, heat is your biggest issue, and if you ever come across a problem where you notice something, you know, over and over again that happens after a certain amount of time, or you're doing something, it's generally heat. So now all we gotta do is reapply our Cooler Master brand thermal paste, and just the teensiest bit of a dot. This is not something where you need a whole lot. For something like this, you do not need a whole lot of thermal paste, but you do want to cover the whole thing. And so, like, it's not, it might be a little bit much. So, it's a very, very small, mini pea-sized amount that I've spread over, the lid. So now we're just gonna reassemble it really, really easily. If you do want to do like a full clean of something like this, it's actually it's actually really, really easy to get the screws off of the cowl and everything. But generally, if you've taken it apart this far, you really don't need to do a whole lot to clean everything out. This fan is pretty damn clean, and that's because the last time I did it, I spent like an hour cleaning it all off. And reassemble and reapply the screws. Yeah, like I said, it doesn't take a whole long. We've already fixed the problem, now it's just reassembling it. That's it. You don't want to tighten these, and you'll find this with just about any computer part. You do not want to tighten anything down until all the stuff is, because you can put some serious pressure on something that doesn't need it. None of this stuff needs to be tightened very much, and it's the same way with like older CPU coolers or like an AIO, that you'll have the bracket and then you screw it down there. You always want to just sort of finger tighten it to begin with, and then just do it like a final careful but with confidence small careful turn, so as just to tighten it down just the right amount, so it's not going to move or anything like that, but it's not going to break if somehow you just move it a smidge. And let me just add as an afterthought here, because I've said many times I liked the way that graphics cards looked a few years ago, because nowadays you've got these giant huge cards, which is fine because cards need to be big because they need to get rid of all that heat. But the cards are so ugly these days. Like, to me, they all look like electric shavers. It's just that's the most apt analogy that I can possibly apply to this particular part, because it's just, they used to be so timeless and elegant, and now they're jagged and they're edgy. They don't need to be. I want I suppose, you know, the products are geared for a younger audience, which is fine, but for a lot of us that actually grew up with all this stuff, I miss when the parts just looked pretty. Because you can spruce up your computer with any number of other parts and it'll look just fine. You don't need to ruin what is going to be a centerpiece of your computer by making it look like a damn Ferrari. If I'm already looking at something that's pretty nifty looking, it doesn't need to completely steal the show, because yes, the graphics card is a centerpiece, but it's a centerpiece to a much bigger exhibit. So we're done. That's it. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 screws, and, you know, reapplying thermal paste. That was it. We're done. Now this needs to go back into BLANDALF and power it all back up, and I'm sure it'll be just fine. Yay! Yes, it's a 750 Ti. I don't want to hear any guff about it because it works just fine for me. So, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.